A lot of people think in a nonprofit space, we just have to say yes to everything. But sometimes in order to be excellent at serving the people who count on us, we have to say no. What do you think about that?
I 100% agree with that. I was talking to my executive assistant, and right after the wildfires, we were getting calls from all over the world offering help. And I said no, probably more than I've ever said in all the years I've been here, because our motto is yes, we can, right? And but I knew that we have to be intentional. We have to do what we can. If we're going to say we're going to do something, we have to be able to do it and not give people false hope. And what that did, again, was open up opportunities where we didn't commit to things early on that we couldn't do. And then eventually there were funding opportunities that were in our wheelhouse. That was exactly what we could do. We had the infrastructure. We knew how to do it. And that resulted in bringing in about $100 million into the county to provide assistance to people that were impacted.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart and Hustle podcast. I am incredibly excited for you guys to be able to learn more about my guest today. This is an amazing leader who is literally calling in from paradise today. We're going to be talking about some of the things that are challenges when it comes to creating community-based services, supporting the people around us, challenges in leadership. We're going to talk about island-based nonprofits, which Debbie here has an amazing experience in. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Hi, aloha from Maui.
So Debbie, I want to kind of give everybody a little bit of flavor about this amazing individual who sits across this digital table with me here today. So you are currently the CEO of the Maui Economic Opportunity, aka MEO. Now, one thing that we should recognize is that your organization was founded in 1965 under the Economic Opportunity Act. There's 1,000 other organizations that have been stood up underneath this act that went into action in 1964. So how did you become this amazing leader who sits across from us with such an amazing responsibility?
Well, I lived in Maui. I grew up in Oahu. My dad was in the Navy. I lived in Maui since my early 20s, and I worked for a large retailer called Liberty House. And I was worked my way up through the company, and I was their assistant HR officer. And I had been there 20 years, and I was sort of ready to spread my wings. And back then, everything was in the newspaper, and you had to open it and read it, and there was no online anything. And I saw an ad for a HR manager for this organization, and I was like, well, I don't know what that's about, but human resources is transferable skills, whatever kind of industry you're in. So I put in my application, and I got an interview, and I really didn't know anything about the organization. I was kind of embarrassed a little bit. I did see, and you couldn't go online and look it up. Like now you can Google it, and you can get all this great information. So I did know that they did buses, and I saw some of the buses with special needs children, and so that's sort of all I knew. So I came in and did an interview, and I got hired, and I did that. I was in that role as the HR manager and then the chief human resource officer, being a strategic partner with the organization for about 10 years. And then there was an opportunity to be the chief operating officer, which is more on the program side of things. And I was like, well, I don't know if I really wanted to do that, but I had the CEO at the time approach me and said, I think that you have a really good perspective of the organization and you'd be good at that. So I did that for about 7 years. And honestly, the first few years, I really didn't like it very much. I was kind of uncomfortable with I missed the people part. I missed the HR part, like really kind of being in the trenches with the folks. But I made the transition, and when I started to connect the dots, it made it easier, to enjoy that. So I spent 7 years doing that, and then the CEO at the time very abruptly decided she was going to retire. Her husband had some health issues, and she said, I told the board, I want you to take over. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. But my husband said, well, if you don't, they're going to bring in somebody out from outside and you're going to have to teach them everything. And I'm like, well, so I did, and I have not regretted a minute of it. So I've been the CEO since 2017, and I just feel so fortunate and blessed to lead this organization. And I didn't had no idea what I was in store for 24 years ago.
In 2023, there was a national survey that was founded. CEOs, COOs, and CFOs were all asked which team member has the skill set to be the future leader and CEO of this organization. 92, 93, and 94% of those C-level executives all identified HR leaders because they understand the 360 view of the organization, but more importantly, they're in tune with the people. Why do you think being an HR leader was something that you've been able to leverage in your skill set to be the CEO here today?
Well, I love the people. I'm a very hands-on leader. I like to know who's working for me and what's important to them. And we are a human service organization. I mean, everything we do is about people. So if we take care of the people that work for us, then they can take care of the people that we are here to help. And and I think being an HR person gave me a really good perspective about that, like what things impact them. You know, if somebody's got a personal problem and there's a garnishment that's coming in, not everybody knows that. And not everybody shares. So you have to meet your people where they're at. So, you know, you can have two employees and one never shares any of their personal issues, but they're struggling just as much as this person who always shares, maybe overshares. And so how do you make sure that you're respectful of people and not make assumptions based on things you don't know?
Meeting people where they are. You know, one of the things that I talk a lot about on the podcast is we saw in the recent years the Great Resignation, where people were leaving their jobs. And I had an amazing leader on the podcast a couple days ago who said, you know, we have to remember that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers and leaders. Why do you think so many people had negative experiences with leaders who weren't willing to meet them where they are, especially over the last couple of years?
I think sometimes leaders get so caught up in the business and then they don't realize like all the other things that are going on, and it becomes very transactional. And so, you know, they like, I have to get this done, and you just need to, you know, pull up your pants and move on. You know, you have to, you know, pull yourself by your bootstraps and do it. And I think particularly in this day and age, people are not like they're not wired that way. So really trying to understand like where they're coming from, to make sure that you're offering them some value. Well, your company's benefiting, but what is the value to them to be there? And I think for us, we're very lucky because a lot of people stay. I've got employees, our average employee's been here about 9 years, which is very high for a nonprofit. And we've got employees that have been here over 30 years. And they stay because they believe in the work and the mission, and they love to come to work and feel like they're doing something good. My former career, you know, was in retail, and some of those people that I worked with, I actually was able to bring them into my organization because they had the people skills to do the work, learn the business, and they say every day, like, I feel so blessed to work somewhere where I'm making a difference.
Serving the community. You know, one thing that I will always talk about was when I was living on Oahu from 2020 until 2022, I experienced a culture of ohana, of family, of people who are willing to stand up and do right by each other because this is our community. And that's something that I think is incredibly unique to the islands of Hawaii that so many people don't understand. I mean, when it comes to providing the services you guys provide on, I'm just going to kind of go through the list here. You guys have the Head Start program, senior citizen engagement. You guys have immigration support, youth programs. You have business development. You guys have disaster release efforts. How much more can you guys do for the community? It seems like you guys are doing so much to serve the people who you love so much.
Well, We're required. Our core funding comes from the Community Service Block Grant, which is part of the funding that came through the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. So we're the designated entity for Maui County, and along with that comes a responsibility to do a comprehensive community needs assessment every 3 years. So we talk to clients, we talk to informed residents who know what's going on in the community, what's important to them. We bring in legislators, we talk to our partners, and we talk to our clients and our employees. And we do this really in-depth review. Then we use all the census data and all of that, and we make sure that what the work we're doing is in alignment with what's important at that particular time. You can't keep doing the same thing all the time. I think sometimes some organizations get caught in that, well, this is what we've always done. And we're designed to be nimble so that if things change that we can pivot and try to address those needs. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think we don't want to, one of the things I said when I took over is I'm not necessarily looking to grow the organization in terms of expanding what we do, but looking at our core programs and making sure they're relevant and they're meeting the needs of the people that they're intended to assist.
I want to talk a little bit about the culture of nonprofits. I had the privilege of sitting across from the CEO of a United Way in Knoxville, Tennessee. And he said, one thing that we have to get more comfortable with as leaders of nonprofits is the impact that we're making. And because the world and the landscape of our communities is changing so quickly, we cannot rely on the idea of we've always done it this way, so we're going to continue to do it this way. And it kind of hit on this. I want to share a story with you. I've been sharing a story about an experiment. There are 4 monkeys who are put into a room, and in the middle of the room, there is a ladder. The scientists would put bananas at the top of the ladder and allow for the monkeys to climb up and eat the bananas. Now, the second time they put the bananas at the top of the ladder, they actually threw cold water into the room on top of the monkeys, and they didn't want to go up and grab the bananas. Now, what they did is they took one monkey and replaced it with a new monkey. So when they put the bananas on top of the ladder, the new monkey would try and climb up, and the other monkeys would grab it down, and they would say, we don't climb up to the top of the ladder. You continue that experiment, and before you know it, there's all the monkeys who have been replaced who never experienced the initial splash of water. And if you were to ask them, why don't we climb up and go get the bananas? They would say, I don't know, but this is how we've always done it here. That mindset of this is how we've always done it seems like it's not a very fortuitous mindset to be able to meet the needs of the community in the future. Why did you kind of lean into that mindset of we can't do the same stuff that we've always been doing here if we're going to be able to meet the needs of the people who we serve?
Well, because I listen to the people that are in the community and they're talking about what they need. And I'm looking at, we use statistical data. We use, facts and numbers, but we also look at stories, right? We look at anecdotal, information that says this is the impact that it makes. So if, and I'll use an example. We had a very prestigious program that we ran before I joined the organization, and we struggled probably over the last maybe 12 years with really fulfilling the obligations of that program, and nobody wanted to give it up because it was a part of our history and who we are, and people identified with that. And so it took a transition for me to say, this isn't working. It's not highest and best use of your time. It's not really benefiting the community, and maybe we should focus on other areas. And it finally was a little painful, got people on board to buy into that, and we did let that go. And that opened the door for us to do other things that we may not have had capacity to do that I think are going to make a larger impact. So I think just being willing to be really objective and take the personal feel good, but this is what people recognize us, and but it's a double-edged sword because they can recognize you, but then you're also hurting your reputation if you're not fulfilling your obligations, right?
I had a CEO of an organization out of North Carolina called Thompson Child and Family Focus. And this CEO came into the organization about 7 years ago, and they were doing about $5 million in revenue. And he's been able to grow the organization to $50 million in revenue, another nonprofit. And he said, You want to know how I did this, Keenan? I said, how'd you do it? He said, by saying no. A lot of people think in a nonprofit space, we just have to say yes to everything. But sometimes in order to be excellent at serving the people who count on us, we have to say no. What do you think about that?
I 100% agree with that. I was talking to my executive assistant, and right after the wildfires, we were getting calls from all over the world offering help. And I said no, probably more than I've ever said in all the years I've been here, because our motto is yes, we can, right? And but I knew that we have to be intentional. We have to do what we can. If we're going to say we're going to do something, we have to be able to do it and not give people false hope. And so, and what that did, again, was open up opportunities where we didn't commit to things early on that we couldn't do. And then eventually there were funding opportunities that were in our wheelhouse. That was exactly what we could do. We had the infrastructure. We knew how to do it. And that resulted in bringing in about $100 million into the county to provide assistance to people that were impacted. So that's a great reason to say no when, when you're thinking, just because somebody wants me to do it, maybe that's not the best thing to do.
But man, Debbie, wasn't that scary during that time? People flooding you literally with opportunities to support. Did you get any type of backlash from maybe the community of like, Debbie, we should be saying yes to all this stuff?
Yeah, I had a few people. I actually had a legislator say to me, well, what are you folks doing? And they were so used to us being the first ones to step up and do something. And I honestly was trying to figure out, like, how can we make the most impact? How can we really be helpful and not just spinning our wheels? And my staff had worked incredibly hard during COVID, my core staff, and we didn't hire additional people. And we helped about an additional 13,000 households during COVID with emergency assistance. And we never closed. We didn't have the public open, but we were providing rental checks and paying people's car payments and their medical bills and buying groceries and all of this stuff for about a year and a half during COVID. And they were tired. And I thought, if I get them into another situation where there's no and we're not closed down because we're wide open doing all the other things we normally do, that's not going to be healthy for anybody. And so I had the lieutenant governor say to me later, she said, it takes a strong leader to be able to say no and to know when it's time to say no and when it's time to say, yes, I can do it. So I appreciated that.
When we say yes to one thing, we inherently are saying no to something else. And that's something that I think we need to ground ourselves in a little bit more, is if I say yes to this, what do I have to say no to later? Debbie, I recognize, first of all, huge round of applause and appreciation for everything that you have been doing for your community over the last 5-10 years. I mean, thinking about the impact that you've had, not only during the pandemic, but during the wildfires as well, you being the leader who stands fast and stand strong to be able to serve the community is something that I hope you get enough time to actually practice gratitude and the impact that you've made. Do you ever get time to slow down with all the pressure that's on you?
I'm doing better. I'm doing better than I used to. You use the term giving yourself grace, and somebody else said that to me not that long ago, and I am better. I'm very I have very high standards for myself, and I don't expect from my people anything more than I expect from myself, but I do realize sometimes they need a little more support. So yeah, I've been good. My husband's sort of semi-retired, so we've done some trips. I told my staff, unless things, something major happens, don't call me, text me if it's an emergency, and I'll check the email. And they've been really good about it. I really do work with an incredible team, my executive leadership team, and even my senior leadership team, where they really all complement one another and support each other, and everybody tries to help. I mean, like I said, we're helping organizations. So if you come here and you're not geared that way, you're not going to stay, because it's really about service above self. And I know I was doing something one time, and I'm hanging up a banner for some event, and somebody was an attorney, and he said, well, don't you have people to do that? And I said, well, I am the people. We all do stuff. Everybody does everything.
The truest form of an amazing leader, Debbie. You really are kind of that beautiful intersection of heart and hustle. You know, one of the things I'd like to talk about is you hold your staff to the same expectation that you hold for yourself. And you're a high achiever. You've accomplished some amazing things in your career. There's a quote that I like to bring into these conversations. There's an author named Kevin Kelly. In his recent book, he said, "You lead by letting others know what you expect of them, which may exceed what they expect of themselves. Provide them a reputation which they can live up to."
I love that. I just had a conversation earlier this afternoon with one of my emerging leaders, and she's a young leader and runs one of our largest departments. And I told her, I think you might notice I'm kind of pushing a little bit hard. And she said, yeah, I've noticed. And I said, I'm not doing that to make your life difficult. I'm doing that because I see a lot of potential in you, and I know you can do it, and I'm going to give you every tool you need to succeed, but I'm going to let you do it. And she said, okay. So it's exactly what you just said. I mean, I believe in that wholeheartedly. And you know what? People in my career gave me that opportunity. I mean, I had people that pushed me outside my comfort zone. I always say you got that little nozzle in your gut right here, and if that kind of wiggly, then you're outside your comfort zone. But that's when you grow. So that's important to me, and I think I instill that in my children as well. It's like push yourself to be better than you can be, but you're going to make mistakes, and don't beat yourself up either.
How do you create that environment and that culture of being okay with making mistakes, failing forward? What do you think about that?
Well, I think being honest. I mean, I've said that. I said that from the beginning, especially when I took over as the CEO. I said, I don't want to be that emperor in no clothes. So if something's not working, I want to know about it. And if you don't agree with me, it says in our handbook, and that's the HR in me, I know my handbook, it says in our handbook we have an open door policy. And I said, what that means to me is you can come and say anything to me. I said, we can agree to disagree. We can have a discussion about it. I said, because I don't know everything. So if I don't know what you're thinking and you're walking around mad at me, it's not really fair to me because I didn't have a chance to understand where you're coming from. So I try to make the space where the dialogue is comfortable. And I know not everybody will, some people will say, yeah, and they still aren't embracing that. But when somebody does make a mistake, I try to use that as a teachable moment. I'm really a big fan of that, like saying, okay, so what could we have done differently? Or when they come to me sometimes with advice, and I've been trying to do that even more so now, is if they say, well, what should I do? I say, well, what do you think you should do? And kind of let them go through the process and then say, well, maybe we should do this.
I mean, creating that safe space for people to learn is incredibly important. And I see a lot of leaders and CEOs that struggle with that trust of relinquishing the opportunity for our team members to be able to grow. One of the things that I talk about often is 80% as good as you think you could get it done by someone else doing the work is 100% awesome. And sometimes it's about relinquishing trust and creating that safe space for our team to be able to navigate through the challenges and say, well, this is what I would do here, because you don't want to be the genius with 1,000 arms who's literally doing everything for everybody, because then you're not building a team.
Yeah, and I think early in my career, when I was building the HR department, I did that. I felt like I had all these balls in the air, and if one dropped, everything was going to blow up. And then I don't know, I had this self-reflective moment and said, hey, that's probably not the best model, because if I'm not here tomorrow, who's going to do that, and how are they going to know how to do it? And so that helped me pivot and start looking at how do we develop the leaders, give them the tools, let them make some mistakes that are not going to be, super detrimental, but gearing in the right direction. So it's a process. I mean, I think being the, living at an organization and growing up with it it really helps because there's continuity. And so I think it's harder when somebody is in a lot of different organizations because the cultures are all different and you're sort of like reinventing yourself all the time. And then to me, then in my roles, I've been very lucky that I've been able to create better versions of myself throughout the years, or at least I hope
And
so.
yeah, no, I can vouch for it because the person who sits across from me is pretty amazing. The thing I think about is like there's a narrative in social media landscapes right now where you see a lot of people who are very popular on social media say, in order for you to get what you deserve, employee, you should be staying at an organization no longer than a year and a half. Job hop, because you can leverage your skill. But what are some of the advantages of being a part of an organization that you can grow up in that maybe a lot of people who have that short-term mindset aren't going to be able to experience?
Well, if you look at our history, almost every leader in this organization was grown internally. So we're very, very big on that. And it is helpful because then they have all this institutional knowledge, they have the bigger picture and all of that. And I think, yeah, the generation today that is a sort of a practice that's happening quite a bit. But I think staying with a company, understanding, and as long as it's a company that gives you an opportunity to grow, so personal growth, professional growth, then it's worth it staying because then you have a connection to that organization. And then also, I mean, if like if you have a pension or a 401k or whatever that is, that's also, if you keep moving that every time, there's a lot of lost cost that people don't realize that's associated with fee surrendering and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's just more about a sense of place. I think, what if you had to move your house every year or two? I mean, that's,
Great
really
point.
disruptive to your life. So it provides you a continuity, a safe place. Um, but it is important that you feel appreciated and that you do have opportunities. I think you lose people when they feel like there's no other opportunities for them.
Maybe they just haven't come across a great leader like Debbie. I think we can, synthesize it down into something simple. I want to talk a little bit about the unique challenges of being a nonprofit, but being a nonprofit on an island. What are some of the challenges that you face that are unique to your organization that a lot of other CEOs of nonprofits might not experience?
Well, I mean, so we have a fleet of about 100 buses. So, and I have buses on the island of Molokai, I have buses on the island of Lanai, I have buses in Hana, and I have buses here in on Maui Island. And if a bus breaks down, I don't have enough buses or infrastructure on those islands to have a full-time mechanic. And the mechanics on the island don't want to serve the buses because they have small shops and it takes up all their space. So I've got to fly over mechanics to at least two. I have to have a space for them to do the repairs. And then flying back, and if it's on Lanai, they have to take the ferry, and if the weather's bad, the ferry doesn't run, and all of those things. And even to get supplies, if we need things, you can't just drive to the next town and pick up something. And of course, everybody I know nationwide experienced you know shortages during COVID with like air conditioning for buses and all of that kind of stuff. So it just everything takes longer and it's so much more expensive. It's so expensive. I was just talking to my transportation manager today and she said, I think we should be swapping out those buses at Molokai and bringing them to Maui when they start getting older so that they're here and we can take care of it and they've got to take it back. And I said, well, then we got to put that in the budget. We got to figure out how we're going to fund that because that's quite expensive, which then means to get one bus here, I have two shipping costs because I got to send one over and bring one back. And it's just that, the time. And I think the other thing too is, your workforce is only here. So you can't drive from from Maryland and go down and work in Washington, D.C. I mean, my brother, for many years after he grew up, he moved back to the East Coast for a little while, and he drove from Silver Spring down to D.C. and worked and drove back. You can't do that here. So you don't have that capacity to increase your workforce. You have to really just focus on your what you have locally.
And I think that creates a unique opportunity to invest into the people of the organization, because retention is not only a strategy to build great culture, but it's also a cost reducing structure or a strategy as well, which is really important to kind of think about from the tactical nature of what you guys do every day.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that.
Let's spend a little bit of time, Debbie, kind of talking about where we came from and where we're going. So we know that you have some lofty goals to be able to be traveling here, in the next, let's say 5-10 years, right? Where you want to be able to spend time with your husband. What is the future that you're hoping for when it comes to MEO and the things that you're trying to cast a vision for the next great leaders to kind of take over this amazing organization?
So we ran a federal Head Start preschool program for low-income children and families, and we've been doing that since 1965. That was one of our first programs. And but it's always the federal government only funded it up till 12 o'clock. So the county of Maui was funding the afternoon to end when the DOE schedule ended. And I've always wanted to offer that as a full day, 12-month program because our target audience are low income families, they're working families, or they're in school, and school and work doesn't end at 2 o'clock. So what do you do with the child? And I said, I don't think we're really meeting the full needs of the families if and Head Start is a comprehensive family program, not just for the children, but also they have family partnership agreements for the parents. So we actually just were granted some funding over the next 5-year period to do exactly that. So I'm so excited that we have this opportunity to increase our core funding so that we're going to move to a 12-month true full day, 7 to 5 a.m. program or p.m. program to really support those families. And then also we have a property that was given to us by a donor back in 2007 that we were going to use for a reintegration program. And we never were able to make that work. And it was two CEOs ago that started it, or 3 CEOs ago. So I reached out to one of our community partners that does housing for low-income people, and I asked him if he would partnership. So he found a developer, and we just got our district boundary amendment approved to change it from ag to urban, and we're going to be building 120 affordable rental units in Wai'ehu, Maui, and it is for low income, and it is always going to stay low income, and it will help people build that funding reserve, hopefully, so that then they can buy their own house later or move into into an unsubsidized type of living situation. So construction here takes a long time, but I'm hoping that we're going to start breaking ground, by the end of 2025 at the latest, and that will be exciting. And then we've been doing a lot of focusing on adult and teen financial literacy and credit repair through our business development center, and not just for business owners, but also for people that are enrolled in some of our other programs, because we're finding that the financial literacy is one of the biggest barriers to people achieving economic security, because a lot of times people will get you get a child tax credit refund from the IRS and they'll spend it. And I realize sometimes they have to, but they'll say, oh, I want to treat everybody to something. And so teaching them about wants versus needs, really understanding how credit impacts you, not taking out too many credit cards because they're offered to you and then you're only paying minimum, and what that really is doing to your overall financial health. So that's a big focus. And then we've also been focusing a lot on food insecurity. So we're running senior farmers nutrition market program, so it gets fresh and fruits and vegetables in the hands of the seniors, but it also helps the local farmers because it's economic stimulation for them. It's money that is, and then it's teaching the seniors that once the subsidy ends and you're going to buy your vegetables, don't go to the market, but go to the local farmers, go to those farmers markets, support local. And I think in Maui, there's a big resurgence of local farms and farming. So I think that's going to be exciting. And then I think the other thing is we've been providing tools to youth to identify risk-taking behaviors, and we've expanded that. It used to only be on Maui Island. We have expanded it this last 2 years to the island of Molokai. We're helping about 1,000 youth a year throughout the county, and really feel like focusing on that group is so important, because if they have those tools and those protective factors now, they're going to be much more successful later, and they won't end up in our reintegration program working with folks coming out of incarceration. So those are kind of the main things that we're focusing on in the next few years.
I hope everybody who's tuning in and watching and listening to this podcast just heard Debbie's master plan to be able to impact the community for generations to come. We talk about all of these objectives, Debbie, and we think that they're just things on our checklist. But as I sit here across from you in this digital format, I can truly appreciate the work, the grit, the tenacity, and the compassion that it takes to push a lot of these things across the line. Because when you're serving your community at scale, it's incredible to hear all the things that you're talking about, because you're making a lasting impact in your community. And just thinking that I have the opportunity to sit across from an amazing leader like you is just absolutely phenomenal. It's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very tough often for us to, accept the gratitude that of the amazing work that we do, which is another form of an amazing CEO. Debbie, I want to ask a personal question. If you could go back 10 years and you could give advice to your younger self, what would you say to Debbie?
Yeah, I think I would have given myself grace much, much earlier, not be so hard on myself. I'd, beat myself up, second guess myself. Funny, one of my daughters is a nonprofit leader now. She's 35. She's been with that organization about 10 years. And I give her all that advice. And I think she takes it, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't second guess yourself. You make a decision, and you just go forward with it, and you can't look back, because coulda, woulda, shoulda is not healthy.
As part of our final tradition here as we end our episode, Debbie, we had a leader who wanted to ask you a question from our previous episode. Now, this individual is named Elizabeth Matthews. She is the CEO and founder of an amazing organization called EMG Consulting out of on the East Coast. And her question for you was, if you could give advice to others in your space that you should lean into harder, that is outside of the traditional thought, what would that advice be?
Try to make it fun. I think that's so hard when the work is so hard and the people, there's tragedy you see and struggles. Try to figure out how to make it fun. Have some fun while you're doing it. Yeah, I think that's it. How can I make work fun when it's pretty daunting sometimes?
I would like to use the last couple seconds here for you to be able to run a mini commercial, if you will. If people want to find out more about MEO, if they want to find more out about Debbie, how can they get in touch with you? How can they find out about the amazing work that you guys are doing for this amazing community?
Well, we have a website, and it's meoinc.org, meoinc.org, and we try to keep it updated. So there's a lot of information about all of our board members, our senior staff, and client testimonials, program information. And you probably could Google me if you wanted to see different things that we do. Yeah, You can email me at Debbie, Debbie dot Cabebe, Cabebe at meoinc.org, or give us a call, and our number's on our website.
Debbie, thank you for being the true definition of heart and hustle. This has been an absolute blast, and thank you for blessing this stage with me. It's been an amazing time getting to know you and sharing your story.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been my pleasure.